Hello everyone, I'm Heinz Winkler and welcome to this special edition of the In Hindsight BOLDCAST. In light of the horrific terrorist attack in Bondi Beach, Sydney, Australia, where two gunmen let loose on a crowd of Jewish people celebrating Hanukkah, killing 12 that we know of so far, injuring over 40 more. The youngest of the victims that passed away was a 10-year-old girl, the oldest a 87-year-old male. The tragic loss of life, the horrific terror of the whole event, just it shocks the world, obviously. And we have to look at what happened, but more so why it happened. Could this have been prevented? And for that reason, I'm chatting to a few friends of mine that are today all over the country and the world to give us their perspectives on this. I'm speaking to friends of mine. Some are Christian, some are Jewish, and we are getting a perspective on how they have experienced this, how they've seen this, and what are perhaps the warning signs from this incident for us here in South Africa, but also for other nations around the world. So I'd like for you to watch these interviews, think about it, and have your say, but also help us to share and get this out to as many people as possible. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. Thanks for subscribing and being part of these very important conversations. And I hope that this is enlightening to you and that we will see you back on this channel. But for now, please sit back and focus and listen to these amazing conversations with some individuals who have great insights into what transpired over the weekend. Howard Feldman, welcome to this special edition of the In Hindsight BOLDCAST. I thank you that you took time out of your holiday to speak to me today. Obviously, the events of yesterday are quite alarming, shocking, and overwhelming. I wanted to check in with you and see, how are you doing? What are you hearing? How did this impact you and your family and friends?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for reaching out. It's an incredibly important thing when friends do reach out and say, just thinking of you, because these events do connect us. The Jewish world is, as I think you know, very, very interconnected. We were at the airport yesterday when we started getting reports, and my wife and I just started messaging people, friends, to say, are you okay? Are you there? Who's there? Where are your kids? You know, that type of thing. So it's a horribly familiar feeling for us, unfortunately, and also a feeling that it makes us angry, because it's not as though we didn't see this one, particularly this one, coming. So it's a lot of emotion. It's not easy at all.
Just expand on that. Why do you say it's not like we couldn't see this coming?
Immediately following October 7th, we started to see what was going on in Australia, particularly. There's this whole notion of globalizing the Intifada. The one that really did shock us was Australia. Many people, as you know, many South Africans have left left South Africa, gone to Australia because there's stability there. There's all sorts of things. And when we started to see this, we knew that there's a bit of a problem here. And then I think the figures are something like 2,000 anti-Semitic events in Australia in the last 2 years. There's been a desperate plea by the community, by Israeli leaders to the Australian government to get a grip, to get a handle on it, and they haven't done that. So they've also got very strict gun laws there, which certainly might help the terrorists, but it certainly doesn't help anyone else. So there's so many aspects of this that are that made it sadly obvious that something like this was going to happen.
Howard, please help us understand what exactly is Hanukkah. Why is it so special? And why is it so extra devastating that Jewish people were attacked on this very holy day?
So Hanukkah it functions on a number of levels. It was around the Yakcobi revolt. there was this miracle of light where oil needed to last. They needed oil, which they didn't have. They only had one day, and it lasted for 8. But to me, it is so deeply symbolic because, and I think it connects to what we're seeing around the world, Christianity-wise as well, is why an attack on Hanukkah? Why an attack on tree lighting ceremonies for Christmas trees? And because that's light. It's light, and this is ultimately a battle between light and darkness. Hanukkah is a festival of light. We light a candle, we bring light into the world, we dispel darkness. When you're lighting a Christmas tree, no matter what the Christmas tree symbolizes or not, it's become a symbol of light, of faith, and this is a battle against light. It's forces who want to bring darkness into the world. Why else would what is Hanukkah? It is just a celebration of faith, of commitment, of miracles. That's what it is, and it's all about just bringing light into the world. So when you go and you mow people down, families down, who are just there to celebrate faith, it's particularly evil.
It is. I saw a report just an hour or so ago that the youngest victim who lost her life was a 10-year-old girl.
10-year-old, yeah.
And the oldest is an 87-year-old man, I think, if I read correctly. And so it was sorry.
Well, he's a Holocaust survivor.
What?
If it's the same man, there was an older man who was killed. I don't know exactly his age. He's a Holocaust survivor. So can you imagine surviving the Holocaust, going to Australia and being murdered at Bondi because you're Jewish?
Just because you're Jewish.
It's unfathomable. Absolutely unfathomable.
There seems to be these two major ideas that are playing out, and we hear anti-Semitism, we hear Islamophobia, and you're not allowed to say the one, you're not allowed to be the other. What is your take on what anti-Semitism actually is? What is your take on this thing of just using a broad brush across anyone who says anything negative about Islam? How do you view that?
So again, I find yesterday incredibly symbolic. I don't know if it's because I'm on holiday and I'm thinking too deeply, but the fact that one of the heroes of the day yesterday was a Muslim man sends a very clear message to me, and that is that the way to stop radical Islam or Islamism is via the Muslim community. And we've seen it in South Africa. We've seen it anywhere in the world. I mean, when you're on a WhatsApp group and Jews are being attacked or bullied, very, very often other Muslims on the group will stay quiet. And it's not about Muslims. It's about everybody. We all... It's much easier just to stand back and say, look, I don't want to get involved in this. Let's wait until it passes. But the reality is that no one has that luxury, and Muslims around the world no longer have that luxury. And that's what we saw yesterday. We saw a hero standing up, and he saved many people. Ultimately, the redemption of this will also need to come from within that faith. And as Jews, we used to being criticized all the time. Christians have become part of that as well, whereas maybe relatively new, but you can speak to that more than I can. But I've noticed an enormous criticism of anybody Christian. The minute you of Christian faith, well, then you represent, I'm not even sure what it is. So we've become almost apologetic, and we've been forced to be apologetic. We can't afford to be. We actually cannot afford to be. It's an old classic America is saying what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. And this is not just an attack on Jews. This is an attack on Judeo-Christian values. It's an attack on things that many people hold dear. It's a tragedy, and it's a war, unfortunately.
It seems to be very clear that radical Islam is not at all compatible with basic Western Christian-Judeo civilization values. Like, there's no way that it can work together. And we seem to have this problem that it seems to have been, adopted by, broadly by the West, that no, let them in. They're seeking asylum. They are, doing this, doing that. I know people like Douglas Murray are just calling it out and say it's false pretenses. I know that someone like Luhai Al-Sharif, who is a Muslim that I spoke to recently, he said there's a massive difference between being a radicalized Muslim and what he calls a spiritual Muslim. And he himself used to be radical, now he's not. And he's speaking out against this, and he's warning every Western country to say, stop letting them in, stop letting them take over, stop letting them get positions in government, because they are slowly but surely trying to take over. They're not assimilating, they're dominating. Would you agree with those kinds of assessments and statements?
So the truth is, I don't know, and I'm not an expert on that. And I've still got that part of me, that's this liberal part of me that says we all want the same things and everybody is after the same things. But it's becoming harder and harder to see this because in truth, why aren't people standing up? And when I look at our own situation in South Africa since October the 7th, and I just want to go back to the fact that you did reach out to me yesterday. I can't tell you how few people who maybe are in government and who I would talk to very, very often, especially because it suited them in the public forum, etc., suddenly I didn't hear from again. Why? Because they're a little bit nervous to speak to somebody who's maybe on that side and is a little bit risky. And I shouldn't be risky. No matter how people brand me, I'm not a racist, and I'm not anything that I've been accused of. But just simply because I'm too dangerous, people have not reached out to me. And when I look at that, and I look at the lack of courage that we see from many of our politicians, from many people in the public space, that worries me, because until people are prepared to stand up, yes, even though there's a risk, we're going to get a hiding to nothing. And at some point, we're going to wake up. But we might as well do it earlier than later. Why do we need to wait for so many people to be killed?
I agree with that. And I was going to actually ask you, do you think that we should heed a warning from this incident as South Africans and go, if we don't get certain things in place, and if we keep allowing certain things, we might see a similar incident in our nation? Do you think this is something we should take seriously, or do you think we should isolated?
No, I think we should take it seriously, but I want to qualify that. I still, with all of this, don't believe that aside from a relatively small group of people, I do not believe that South Africans are anti-Semitic. I still don't believe it, but we do have a risk of foreign actors, of people who have been radicalized. And we can see this took two people. This took two people. That's all it took. So I think that there's been a very dangerous precedent set in government. I think Naledi Pandor has brought terrible to government, and is very clearly not, to put it mildly, a lover of the Jewish community. So I think that has a danger. But I think that our bigger danger is not from South Africans, because I really don't believe South Africans are anti-Semitic. I believe that it is what they have created in terms of maybe creating fertile ground for a foreign actor to come into South Africa and do damage.
Okay, so how do you qualify anti-Semitism? Because from my perspective, I've seen massive rallies, pro-Palestine rallies that seem to be very anti-Israel and anti-Jewish people at the same time. Is that not anti-Semitism, or do you mean that it's such a small minority, it's not the...
No. So I do think there's an element of anti-Semitism there. When you're walking with a Hezbollah flag or a Hamas flag, and that's anti-Semitism. Yeah. A criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic. I'm deeply critical of many aspects. Every Israeli is critical of Israel. Jews as you well know, have opinions on anything. Okay. So that in of itself isn't anti-Semitism, but what I've quoted on this podcast, but there was a famous American jurist who was asked to define pornography. And he said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. And to some extent, anti-Semitism is a lot like that. If we take many of our publications, it's only reporting when Israel retaliates on something. Yeah. So you'll have months and months of rockets being fired at civilians, no reporting. Yeah. Israel retaliates, and that's reported, and then nothing is verified, and things that aren't credible are promulgated. So it's that, to me, it's very hard to define anti-Semitism.
Okay.
But I can tell you that the one thing that no one should do is tell a Jew that it's not anti-Semitism. Yeah. Because you can say it as much as you like. We know when it is, and we know who is. We don't need somebody else to define it for us. I know that's a non-answer.
So you make a distinction, if I understand you correctly. You make a distinction, and maybe it's the first time I'm hearing it, and maybe I'm ignorant, but I'm hearing a distinction between being anti-Israel and anti-Jewish / anti-Semitic.
No, I'm not making a distinction. I'm saying I'm not. So I'm glad you clarified. Yeah. Criticism of Israel in of itself is not anti-Semitic.
Okay. Do you mean if you criticize the government and its choices?
Criticize the government, criticize their actions, say this is wrong. I don't agree with blah blah blah. But the premise that Israel shouldn't exist as a Jewish state, where we have tens of Muslim states, that is anti-Semitic. Why shouldn't Israel have that? And not being able to recognize the horror of October 7th, but claiming, it was a false flag, it never happened, Israel did the damage.
My goodness.
It didn't start on October 7th. Yeah. That's anti-Semitism.
Yes, okay.
You cannot like what Israel is doing in Gaza, but it's the whole picture. It isn't anti-Semitism isn't a statement. It is an anti-Jewish approach.
Yes.
Maybe that is.
I hear you.
It's the demonizing of Jews and of Israel. It's the celebration of, all the conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
That's all anti-Semitism.
Okay, makes sense. Sure, brother. What is your message to? I'm speaking to you as a Christian, and I know that even in Christianity we are very divided. I had a guy who I went to school with comment on my statement yesterday on Facebook. He read my whole statement, and all he took out of it is, why do you specifically talk to born again believers? Because he doesn't see himself as that. So I was like, why make that an issue? I'm speaking to my community. If you said I want to reach out to my Catholic brothers and ask them to pray, I wouldn't be offended by that, But anyway, so that was interesting. But we have our factions, So, and one of the things that you were referring to that I think the Jewish community experiences is the unfortunate thing of what is called replacement theology. that many Christians believe that the church has replaced Israel and the Jews, the people of God. And that is something I fundamentally disagree with. And it's because of what I read in the Bible, which is very interesting.
Right.
So,
which is kind of the source.
Yeah. And so that's one fundamental place that we differ on. But, I want you to know that from those that I do represent and who do believe the same as I do, we support you, we pray for you, and those around the world, and obviously for the loss, the absolute devastation that people are experiencing right now in that community in Bondi and in Sydney. So know that you're not alone, and we stand with you and pray for you. And if you do have a message for,
so I do, and whenever you come onto my radio show, the number of messages that I receive, both from Christians and from Jews afterwards, is enormous.
Sure. Okay.
In a way, it's a little sad that most of the messages I'm receiving from Jews are immense gratitude to you, as though somebody showing us support is something that we need to be deeply grateful. Now, we should be grateful because it comes at a cost, and I don't doubt the cost that it comes at for you. But in a way, there's something quite sad about it, because Jews are isolated more than you can imagine. I've got many, many friends, and some of them in the public space, who phoned me after October 7th and said, what do you think I should do? I want to stand up, but I'm petrified that this is going to mean the end of my business. And I can't tell you how common that is. And my advice to them then was, then just worry about your family, worry about that right now. Let others, the idiots like me, do the talking. But 2 years later, I realized that, not that I'm certain if they would have taken my advice or not, but I think that advice was wrong. My advice now is every single person, and I think that's advice to both Jews, Christians, and to Muslims who don't want to see their faith destroyed, like we saw yesterday with the one brave individual who stood up, is we all have to stand up. We don't all need to go and wrestle a loaded gun from an assailant, but we need to stand up whenever there is that opportunity. And there's no longer an excuse to say, well, it'll affect my business. It's going to affect your business. And if it doesn't affect your business, it's going to affect your kids. It's going to affect the world that we live in. And that's it. You are being called. We are all being called at this point. And you can avoid the politicians who sort of avoid having contact with me just in case it's a bit dangerous. You can avoid that, but ultimately you're going to pay the price one way or another because of it. Australia paid the price yesterday because of Albanese, because of the way that they were petrified to deal head on. Nobody respects weakness in the world that we live in.
Unfortunately.
As a Christian, you're strong in your faith. As Jews, we are called on to be strong in our faith. If we aren't, unfortunately, we're going to be forced to be at some point, and we might as well do it earlier than later.
It seems to me that there needs to be kind of like a rally cry that no matter what your faith is, can we find a unifying factor? And can that unifying factor be that we respect human life, that we respect the fact that each of us deserves to breathe and live our lives? And I think most people can agree to that. We can differ about, many things, but can we agree that everybody who's alive deserves to stay alive? And because I've heard from a few sources that the main reason for these kinds of attacks is it's indoctrinated through education from a young age in the Muslim faith. And so they grow up with this picture that, a Jewish person is kind of like on the level of an animal. They don't deserve to live. And it's a mindset. And if you have that mindset, then you will destroy without any remorse. And so that, I mean, that needs to change for one, but we all need to at least be able to unify around this idea that, listen, every human life is worth, is worth something, and it should be treasured and it should be protected. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I think that's a starting point.
Absolutely agree that well, the point is that you should be able to go to a Christmas tree lighting ceremony without being in fear of your life, and you should be able to go to light Hanukkah candles without worrying that your 10-year-old daughter's going to be shot at by somebody who thinks that's okay to do, and that is part of some form of redemption. I don't even know what it is, but yes, that's exactly what it is. That is a starting point, and that is something. But and it's conversations like these that hopefully people will maybe respond to.
Let's hope.
I hope so.
And what you mentioned earlier makes me think of this: that every voice counts. Each person might think, oh, what difference am I going to make? But every voice counts. So if you in your context, just stand for truth and righteousness and justice and human life, and when someone is trying to go against that, just in a conversation, maybe by not accepting certain arguments, maybe by protecting when you see something is heading in a bad direction. Each of us have a sphere of influence, some greater, some smaller, but every voice counts. And I think if anyone listening now would just realize, I can make a difference no matter how small it is, and the collective effect of every voice standing up against tyranny should have an impact eventually that I think can be positive.
And maybe even if you don't do it for yourself, do it for your kids.
Absolutely.
What do you want your kids to know? What do you want your kids to see in terms of your courage? It's surely that's important.
And what kind of world do you want them to live in? And how can you help to shape that world? Because we don't seem to be going in a healthy direction in general.
No, we're not. But also, you see, I know that we're going in circles, but when you see this happen, and then you go into Twitter and you go into X, and people are saying, "Oh, this is a false flag event. This is the Mossad," and I'm thinking,
what?
Like, seriously, guys?
My goodness.
Seriously. Yeah, it's like that's how far gone it is. Now it's time to pull it
Holocaust denial all over again. My goodness. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Anyway, brother, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your input. Thank you for all that you do. Rest well. Come back and let's keep fighting the good fight. And
absolutely.
Blessings to your family, and happy Hanukkah to you and your loved ones.
Thank you, and I hope to you as well. May you have a blessed Christmas, and to your family, and a year of peace.
Amen. Thank you so much. God bless you. Bye-bye. Myan Subrayan, welcome to this special edition of the In Hindsight BOLDCAST. We are talking today to you all the way from Perth, Australia. And the reason I reached out to you, brother, is because, we recently became friends. We've ministered together. And you've been in Australia for quite some time. You've seen what's going on there. You've got a sense of the spiritual atmosphere. And with this horrible attack we saw in Sydney on Bondi Beach, I just had to reach out and get your take on this. So brother, firstly, how are you? How have you experienced this thing? What's happening in Australia, and what is your take on all these things that are taking place?
No, well, good day to you guys. It's almost the evening here for us in Australia. Good to be here, and not the best of circumstances to be interviewed. I always wanted to be on your podcast, but nevertheless, just so that South Africans are aware. I mean, I know most of your listeners and viewers would be from South Africa, and just to let them know that the tragedy in Australia is that, okay, yesterday was a huge tragedy, but the tragedy before that tragedy was that the warning signs were there. We know the biblical saying, the writing was on the wall, and that's what's coming out now. That the Australian Prime Minister, his cabinet, they were all made aware. I don't know if you saw the recent response by the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And he warned the Australian Prime Minister in August, so much so that he actually read out the warning that he gave to the Prime Minister that, when the Australian Prime Minister sort of, endorsed and called for an independent Palestinian state at the United Nations, and when he ignored the anti-Semitism that was taking place in Australia, he really set the sort of platform for what you saw, sadly, happening yesterday.
Yeah. And so do you think, I know this is just, us looking at the situation and kind of trying to make sense of it, but do you think this kind of thing was avoidable if there was different things in place and a different approach from the government side?
Absolutely, Heinz.
Yeah.
And as I said, the warning signs were given. The warning signs were very evident in Australia. What was happening? There was just an increase in the anti-Semitism. I mean, we ourselves, as a church, we had an organization. It was like a Messianic Christian organization that was invited to speak at our church on the plight of Jews in Australia and how bad the situation was getting for them. And lo and behold, these people picked up through social media what was happening. And guess what they do? They turn up at our church in full sort of aggressive, militant fashion, screaming hatred towards us. This is my children and other children in church. You're going into church. You don't expect to have this hurt. And thankfully, the Australian police tipped us off. And the Australian police said to us, hey, we've picked up chatter in the social media rooms that this is what's been happening. They're actually planning a protest to your church, but don't worry, we're going to come over and we'll give you all some protection. So thankfully, the police was there to de-escalate and to sort of diffuse what could have been a very, very volatile situation. But even in that time, as we walked into the church, they were screaming out abuse, genocide, baby killers, and things these are things you don't want to expect or hear in church, and especially when you're not guilty of these atrocities that they're claiming we are guilty of. So the writing was on the wall. It was evident. So the climate was such that there's been a lot of synagogue attacks in Melbourne, in Sydney. Then you have these protests, so-called protest marches that have been taking place across the harbour bridges in Sydney and Brisbane, where they've been openly displaying ISIS, Hamas, the Iranian flags. These are terrorist organizations, ISIS and Hamas. And this is not me saying it. They've been classified as terrorist organizations. But when these things were raised with the authorities, they just turned a blind eye.
Why do you think that is? What is the reason they give for that? Are they so sensitive to what they call Islamophobia that they don't want to get involved, or are they afraid? What do you think is the reason for that?
Well, I'm going to answer that question. Just remember to ask me that question if I forget. But because you spoke about Islamophobia, this is what took place. The Prime Minister's response to the increase in anti-Semitism, his response to the increase in Jew hatred and Jew attacks, was to set up a concurrent Islamophobic response team to the anti-Semitism. So rather than address the main issue, he created an absolute no issue, because there's no Islamophobia as such on the extent that he claimed it to be. So to answer your question in regards to that, why are they turning a blind eye? Well, number one, the narrative that we've been picking up was that they were afraid that if they went hard on these radicals, that there would be some reprise, as in a mass terror incident. Hello? That approach didn't work, because look what happened yesterday.
Wow. But that is just fear. That's just fear begetting fear. Yeah.
100%.
Goodness.
And when you look at history and you look at what happened when you try to appease, we saw that in World War II when Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, tried to appease Hitler. It just led to, feeding a megalomaniac with more and more. And that's what Netanyahu said in his warning. to the Australian Prime Minister Albanese, he said, appeasement will only breed more appeasement. And he also said that, non-action will breed more incidents of violence against the Jews. And this is where, again, to answer your question, it just didn't make sense, Heinz, that here was the attack taking place. You were getting credible information, intelligence. I mean, the Israelis are one of the best intelligence gathering, people in the world, and they were giving you this information. Your own, Australia's own sort of CIA, FBI was also making note of that. I don't know if your viewers or listeners were aware, but just 2 months ago, they expelled the Iranian embassy to Australia because it was uncovered. Iran was financing the anti-Semitism in Australia.
Sure.
So the writing was there; it was evident. And I know South Africans may not have been exposed to this news, but for those of us that are living here in Australia, that are not brainwashed and hoodwinked by the mainstream media, that find our own sources to get the truth, it was there. It was clear as daylight what was taking place. So this is not new. I mean, it is horrific. It is tragic. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to play down the absolute abhorrence of what took place. But just to highlight, Heinz, that it was not unawares. It didn't keep up in Australia as sometimes, if you're watching mainstream media, you get the, this should not have happened, or how could this have happened? No. If you ignore the warning signs, it will happen. And it has happened.
I know you're in Perth, which is kind of like on the other side of Australia, but what is the sense that you are getting, just from the local media, local social media, or are there Christians and who are standing up against this, who are resisting this whole movement? Are they few in number? Are they significant in number? Or are most kind of just staying quiet, not even trying to address the situation? Because it seems like, some of the official statements we're seeing from the government doesn't even mention Jewish people, Hanukkah, the fact that it was probably a hate crime, nothing of the sort, just that people were shot. Is this kind of the general feel that you're getting from government side? But or what are people saying, like believers, non-believers? What's the kind of vibe in Australia right now that you're picking up on?
Well, I can make an observation that generally speaking, because Australians have been very trustworthy, they believe what the government tells them. They live a very comfortable lifestyle. The situation, the famous saying is, "She'll be right, mates," and that's what it is. They're happy-go-lucky. They don't really look into deeper. If that's what the government says, they don't question it, and they go with it. The other thing that my Australian friends have been quick to point out is that Myan, we've never experienced a war. There's never been a civil war as such, so we don't know what war is like. And now, sadly, what has happened is that the Australian government, through their immigration policies, where they pretty much opened up the borders to the so-called Gaza refugees that have come in, the government has been warned by the Jewish leaders here, by people in the know, the Israeli Prime Minister, that they pretty much imported a terrorist problem, and it was avoidable. When there's a thing here in Australia called ISIS brides. If you get a chance, Google that, have a look at it. So what it is pretty much Australian refugees that were coming into the country from these known ISIS territory countries like Syria, Afghanistan, and the likes, were actually actively going overseas to these countries and bringing back these radicalized brides to join them. And these radicalized brides, together with their radicalized, future husbands or husbands, were Jew haters. They were openly anti-Semitic. They were openly against Western culture in terms of the freedoms that we have and we've grown used to having. And that's where the Australian government was actually paying for these sort of travel costs and to bring these brides across to Australia, which was absolutely ludicrous. So they were bending over backwards to accommodate these things. So that just tells you the level of the government, ignoring the danger, but more than just ignoring it, actually promoting and bringing these so-called radicals into the country, knowing the risk that they pose. I mean, this is not a one-off. I mean, in Australia, we've had a Somalian that went on a knife rampage in Melbourne. We've had situations where the same Bondi Beach, the famous Sydney beach, there was a local mall, a Bondi Mall. You can Google it. Bondi Mall knife attacks. And there was a similar sort of radicalized person that went on a knife rampage and killing people. So, the thing is that these are not isolated incidents. What took place yesterday was not an isolated incident. It was just, sadly, the snowballing.
Like an escalation. Yeah, it's an escalation. Yeah. Wow.
Totally.
My goodness.
So, there have been people that have been warning. I mean, there's a pastor in, I think in Adelaide. I sent you his details.
Yes.
Tedara.
Yeah, he's quite outspoken. I checked out his stuff. He's very outspoken. I like his boldness.
Yeah, so hopefully, we can try and get in contact with him, because he comes from Egypt. And I mean, he spoke about it. He, in the recent post that he's made, which I think I copied you on, he pretty much openly said that this is the Islamic threat that has been imported into the country. He says these are not any other religions. He says these are people that follow the Islamic teachings, and this is something that it cannot be changed. And he spoke about their experiences in Egypt, and he's been very vocal. He was also a good friend of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's had him on his show a few times as well. So again, Heinz, just to highlight that the government was fully aware of it, and that's why I mentioned to you that I've actually started to write another book where I'm wanting to give South Africans a true perspective of what is happening in countries like Australia and New Zealand, where I've lived for close on 20 years now, to get them to understand that, yes, we've got problems in South Africa, don't get me wrong. However, from a spiritual point of view, I think we're better off in South Africa in that regard, where today you see what's taking place now. And I started writing this chapter on faith and the culture shock. And in it, I mentioned, and I said, South Africans need to be aware of the level of anti-Semitism that is taking place in Australia. It is absolutely, on an insane level.
Wow.
And I had to go in today and add in, sadly, this extra bit that took place yesterday, that it was actually something that, we need to be aware of, that spiritually, there's this general rhetoric now where, I mean, you didn't need the Islamic radicals to bring Christian hatred, because Australia being such a secular nation, as a Christian, you don't get, that sort of, I wouldn't say endorsement, but the support. Because Australians, the last census that was done was about 5% of Australians came to be Christian.
5%? My goodness.
5%.
That's a very low number. Wow. Sure. Well, brother, I pray for that nation. I pray for the Jewish community. I pray for the Christians that are there to be bold and courageous. And thank you for what you are doing as a pastor, as a teacher, as an author in that nation. We really appreciate it. Do you have any final thoughts, a message that you have for this time we're in to those who are listening?
I guess the key thing is that, light always triumphs over darkness. John 1:5 is such a powerful verse of scripture where it says that, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness cannot overcome it.
Yeah, sure.
So irrespective, even in times of darkness, and that's been my message for South Africans. I spoke at the Mighty Men in Eastern Cape, and I was absolutely shocked, or not shocked in a bad way, but my message to the men was going to be on, lighting a candle and being a candle in the darkness. And I think I mentioned to you, I stayed overnight in Bethlehem at the former Springbok Bismarck du Plessis' house, and his mum came over for a braai, and she's an Afrikaans teacher or ex-Afrikaans teacher, retired from Portrek Hoër School, and she asked me, what are you speaking about? And I said, Tannie, ek preek oor om 'n kers te wees in the donkerate, to be a candle in the light. And I said to her, and she said, where is the mighty man? And I said, oh, it's at the cherry farm near Fouriesburg. And I said, Connie, what's the Afrikaans word for cherry? And she said, kersie. I said, kersie?
Yeah.
And I said, look at that. I'm
That's
saying
amazing.
to the men to be a kers in the donkerheid op die kersieplaats. So that's my message, Heinz, to people, is to know that, number one, God's light cannot be extinguished by darkness. And number two, Jesus calls us, Matthew 5:14-16, to be the lights in the darkness, to not be afraid, but to let our light shine. So even in these times of darkness, I mean, you look at the good story that's come out with the guy that tackled one of the gunmen and how he was able to put his life at risk. Unfortunately, he didn't realize there was another gunman and he got shot twice. So he's recovering in hospital. So what can we do? We can pray for him, pray for all the families of the victims and those that are still injured, and pray for the peace in Jerusalem. Pray as the Bible asks us to pray for our fellow believers that are here as well, that they won't be afraid, but that they will continue to let their light shine in the darkness, and knowing that ultimately, even at this time of fear, at the time of Christmas, that behold, the light of the world, the light of God is coming to this world, and that we should not be afraid. So that's my message, and thank you as well for what you're doing, for promoting truth and justice and righteousness. And I know that you're not alone. We are part of the remnant, and if God be for us, who can be against us?
Amen. And with that, what you're saying, I think it's quite significant, that it happened at Hanukkah, which is a candlelight ceremony.
There you go.
And where their whole message is to bring light to darkness. And so it's all kind of, lining up in a way. And I was speaking to a friend of mine earlier that I'm also making part of today, who is a South African Jew and a radio presenter. And I said to him, we have different faiths, we have different beliefs, we have different doctrines. Even among Christians, we are very divided. But maybe, if we can find one thing that we can all share as a thing that we can unite around, maybe more people can rally, around that. And I said to him, would it work if we rally around this idea that every human being deserves to live and deserves to be protected and, have a chance to do what they're here to do? And he said, absolutely. And I think, so that for me is a starting point. If we can just unite around that every human being has the right to live and we should protect each other's right to live, I think that's a good starting point. Obviously, I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in freedom of religion. We need to have these freedoms. But if we're not going to respect life, this is the problem. I mean, when I was speaking to a guy who sees himself as a spiritual Muslim, not a radicalized Muslim, about these matters, he said the problem with the radicalized Muslims are they are taught from a young age to hate Jews, that they are less than human. So you've got a massive group of people who just don't think Jews should be alive. And this, how do you reverse that? How do you reverse that? It's a very hard thing to do.
Again, light, shining the light in the darkness,
Yeah.
I'm going to send you a link from Sky News Australia. They just posted something online that highlights exactly what you're saying, the radicalization and how, firstly, your viewers and listeners will get shocked because when they see these scenes of these Muslim clerics indoctrinating and brainwashing people, you think it's in some sort of Middle Eastern country or Islamic country, but it's actually taking place here in Australia.
Wow.
And that's why I say there was also again, the writing on the wall, and when October 7th took place, I think it was 2023 in Israel.
Yeah.
There was huge celebrations here in Australia. The the Muslim community went out to the Sydney Opera House and they were openly shouting, "Gas the Jews, gas the Jews." Then
that's just sickening. That's just sickening.
And the
That's so
government
shocking.
and the police did nothing. So when you appease and when you turn a blind eye to the wrongs, it just escalates. Like you said, it snowballs, and you have what you have. There's even a Muslim cleric celebrating in the town, one of the town cities, whether it's Melbourne or Sydney, I'm not sure, but openly saying, this is a great day, and shouting out, their famous "God is great" sayings, and celebrating. And nothing was done to him. And he was also one of the guys that walked on that Harbour Bridge protest with the ISIS flags and with the Hamas flags. And, therefore, it's sad. It's very sad what's been allowed to happen that
Yeah.
has led to this. So I think one of the key takeaways for your listeners and your viewers is to realize that what took place yesterday in the Bondi massacre wasn't something that was sort of just a spur of the moment thing. There was a procession, and then leading up to this, that was ignored.
Yeah. So that should serve as a kind of a warning for South Africa, right? That, we should be careful not to allow the same kind of things. We need strong leadership. We need leadership with a backbone that'll squash these kinds of incitements to violence. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, even we know from our Bible teachings as well, you can't ignore sin. You can't ignore the things that are wrong.
Yeah.
And we need to balance the messages that we preach. The love and grace messages definitely have a place, but then we also understand that it's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that God is a righteous God, a God of justice, a God of judgment.
Yeah.
So we need to understand as well that there's consequences for our actions, and know that it's important that the full counsel. I mean, Acts 20, I think it's 27, where the Bible says clearly we are called to preach the whole counsel of God. We can't just only focus on one aspect and ignore the truth and the justice. So again, to highlight to South Africans that Australians are generally easy go, lucky people. They love life, and I think one of the other good things that I'm praying for that will come out of this year is that they will now realize the real threat and danger that these radicals have on their general, lifestyle. And there's a lot of Aussies that are coming out now. I've seen it on social media posting, hey, if you don't like our way of life, they use expletives, get the hell out of here and go back. And also another member of parliament that has been warning the Australian government has been Pauline Hanson. If you can as well, Google her and see what people have been wrongfully calling her racist and stuff. But she's been warning the government and telling them over the years. She just recently, did a stunt in Parliament where she entered Parliament wearing a burqa, a full-on burqa, and she was suspended. And she said, "But hold on, if that's allowed to be worn," and the irony is that the Parliament didn't have a dress code. So she's also one that has been outspoken, and her party, I think it's One Nation Australia, they now have been getting good polling because Australians are waking up to the reality that, hey, they've been sold a lie. The emperor is actually naked. It's time to smell the coffee.
It's a wake-up call.
Yeah, so I'm don't get me wrong, I'm not glad that this happened. But as a child of God, we know Romans 8:28 says that all things work together for good to those that love the Lord and are called according to his purposes. And through this bad situation, Australians are finally waking up to the reality of the wicked, evil ideology with these radicalized Muslim men that have gone out and done this heinous attack on, as you said, on life. Because let's face it, Heinz, we know the highest form of humanity is respect for life. John 10:10, Jesus is very clear. He divides it. He says, you're either on the devil's side or my side. He says, the thief comes to kill, steal, rob, and destroy. So if you're killing, you're on that side.
That's very
but
clear.
I come to give you life and give it to you in all its abundance and in all its fullness.
Exactly.
And that's where I may disagree with you, but I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to harm you. I'm going to defend your right to believe in what you believe. And that's what free speech is, or freedom of speech. But sadly, in countries like Australia and the UK, they've gone to an extreme now where freedom of speech is only freedom of speech if you're in agreement with the government. But the UK, I think, is a conversation for another day. But if you know what's happening, you see the rise of radical Islam that's taking place now in these first world countries when they've had these open immigration policies, and sadly, it's been to their detriment. Their way of life has been totally destroyed. And what is their way of life? It's the freedoms that we grew up with. It's the
which was based in a Christian belief, which they've completely lost and are actually handing away. And I mean, I will go even further and add to what you're saying and say that there's a clear attack on Christianity, Bible believing, Christianity standing for truth. When you arrest a woman for thinking a prayer a block away from an abortion clinic, something is very wrong. When you arrest people for posting on social media that they don't agree with the radical Islam things that are happening, you've got a problem. And these are the things that are happening right now. So
who's being protected? That's the thing. Who's being protected?
Yeah.
And that's the
irony
of it.
And to a born-again Christian, this has to be clear that it's a spiritual warfare. It has to be clear. If you can't see that this is spiritual, because nothing in the physical makes sense, then the only thing you can go is like, oh, this must be spiritual. And I hope people will see that. I hope that they will see this is dark forces, pushing against the light, as you said. And we're seeing the physical manifestation of that. So we have to be ready. We have to be aware. We have to get our weapons of warfare, 2 Corinthians 10, Ephesians 6, we have to be ready. That's what I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Brother, I appreciate you. I honor you for standing, and I thank you for giving us your thoughts and inputs on this terrible event that took place yesterday. Our hearts go out to those who have been affected, the victims of this horrible attack. And we pray for Australia. We pray for peace. We pray that minds will shift to a more positive, constructive mindset. And thanks for what you're doing, brother. I really appreciate it. Daniel Yakcobi, welcome to the special edition of the In Hindsight BOLDCAST. Thanks for joining me today. You're heading up the South African Friends of Israel. You're currently in Joburg. Thanks for making some time for talking to me today. I wish we were speaking under different circumstances, but the reason I reached out to you today is so we can talk about the horrific attack that happened yesterday at Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia. Brother, how are you doing? What are your first thoughts and perspective on this whole thing, and what are you hearing in your community? What's going on?
So firstly, Heinz, thank you, my friend, for inviting me, and thank you for raising your voice, for taking a stand in times such as this. We call it in the Jewish community in the state of Israel, righteous amongst the nations, those who really taking a bold stand against anti-Semitism and the rise of hate speech, the developing to hate crimes. So I won't take it for granted as a friend. I really appreciate you.
Of course,
thank you for being you.
Stand with you. Yeah.
Thank you. You asked me how I feel. Well, I think it's kind of a mixed emotions. Yesterday I felt quite down, to be honest. I felt a bit deep sadness and grief with mixed emotions of rage in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
Not really rage for those that attacked our Jewish community in Australia, murdered them in cold blood just because of their faith. I think the rage came for the signs being on the walls screaming, red flags waving all over with so many signs, starting from the 8th of October, that when the thousands of people went outside in Sydney, outside the Opera House, chanting "Gas the Jews."
Yeah.
Those are clearly signs of hate crimes that being developed from speech and against the Jews. Gas the Jews. It's a faith.
And when it's allowed, it's like it's an act of omission and showing everybody it's allowed. It's okay, which is horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, where I felt that rage, but I felt very sad that we're living in such times that, we hearing and the stories from our grandparents, Holocaust survivors, what they've been through, and we're going through that again. This is clearly a second Holocaust against the Jewish faith. So mixed emotions. That's how I think many of us feeling in that moment.
I see that, the response that I'm kind of picking up on is this whole question of what is anti-Semitism actually, and then also people throwing around Islamophobia, and these things are kind of just being thrown around, it seems. What is your understanding of anti-Semitism? What does it include? What does it not include? And how, I'm sure you're aware of how this has been rising since October 7th. It seems it's become worse, not better.
Yeah. You asked me a very deep question, my friend. There is not a simple answer to it. And
okay.
Also
help us to understand it a bit better, maybe. Yeah.
Sure. Look, I'm following, in this life, knowledge is not the only thing that we need in this life. Knowledge is one thing. We need wisdom.
Yes.
And everyone taking their wisdom from different sources. For example, reading the Torah, learning daily, following some of the Chabad teaching of the Rebbe, the sages, the scholars of our age. I think 7th of October was the pivotal historical time where we saw anti-Semitism, as you said, rises in unprecedented levels.
Yeah.
But bear in mind what happened before 7th of October was our nation was divided. We were divided almost completely, banging heads with each other. And I think it goes deeper just to say that there is a geopolitical and obviously there is an incitement for terror, and there is spiritual aspects to it, a religious aspect to it. I genuinely believe that, when we coming together in unity, when we less argue, when we less hate ourselves in our identity, when we proud in our identity, when we are doing more act of kindness, selfless acts, I think that for itself speaks volumes and bring a lot of pleasure to God, to our Father. And I personally genuinely believe, and I know people will call me crazy, but I think that the spiritual realm connected to the physical universe. And what we doing over here manifesting in the spiritual realm. And if the father sees that his kids, you agree? If the father sees that our kids coming together and in selfless acts and act of kindness and in prayer, I believe we can lift each other in prayer. I believe that we need to be more united. And I think that anti-Semitism is for God to counter. As more as we're going to be more proud in our identity, and we can define what this identity means, what those values means, I think God will suppress the anti-Semitism evil spirits. This is my personal belief that I also follow, like I said before, where some of the sages of our days.
Yeah. Do you, you mentioned it kind of earlier, because I just want to ask you straight out, maybe it's also a difficult one, but do you think this kind of attack and others like it are avoidable in the world we live in?
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Why do you say so?
Take out the fact that this is between political parties or different agendas. Just take, for example, a group of people that have the authority on a territory, and that territory becoming hostile, and the leaders of that territory standing up and say, we are drawing the line over here. We're not even accepting hate speech against each other, because we know that this will develop for potential hate crimes and will jeopardize the safety and security of our people in our care. So if those leaders will take a bold stand, and promote policies and enforce the law against hate crimes and hate speech that won't develop for such act of crime against a group of people, I think it's avoidable. Definitely.
Yes. I remember.
I hope that makes sense.
Yes. I remember when I had you and Loai as guests at our church, and we spoke about these things. He pointed out, that you have to realize that there's a radical element in Islam, and they are being educated from a young age to hate Jews. They are being educated to do that. So it's a very hard mind shift to to change, because you cannot just say something and think they're going to not think that way. So to think that someone who has such a strong belief comes to a Western nation to assimilate to the values of that nation is actually very naive. And Luai's own words were, they don't come to assimilate, they come to dominate. And it seems that is what we're seeing playing out in front of our eyes, that the hatred goes so deep, and the will to dominate is so strong that these kinds of incidents are now playing out right in front of us. Is that something that I'm sure you remember the conversation, but do you agree with that? Do you think this is what we're seeing? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Luai spoke the truth. He brought a lot of truth to power in our panel discussion, and I think that the West, such as the leaders of Australia, the leaders in Europe, even in the United States, they're a bit ignorant to the fact that that hatred is derived from ideology that been, as you said, educated through decades. I've been reminded, and there is a video floating around now, of 7 years ago, a foreign ministry of the United Arab Emirates was warning the West and saying to them, you think you know Islam, you think you understand the Middle East. You guys don't understand the radical Islamist ideology that's been birthed out of those areas in the Middle East and been imported into Europe and North America, so they can drive that ideology, and it's becoming well known that attacks that coming from Islamic jihadic forces is clearly against the free world and the West. This is not only against the Jews. We're saying first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. You can see it all across Southern Africa and Africa. The church been massacred and been persecuted.
Yeah,
it's terrible. Those leaders need to wake up.
Yeah, I mean, we need strong leaders to say, no, this is actually not okay. We're going to draw a line and not allow this kind of hate, incitement, and physical violence. It's just not acceptable. My goodness. You kind of think, what is it going to take, for a government like the Australian government to change their ways? Hopefully this, but why did it need to be this? It's horrible. Daniel, you're an Israeli, but you work in South Africa. You've been here a while. Your big focus is to create awareness and to build relationships. Friends of Israel. Having come from Israel, spending time in South Africa, going around to different organizations, churches, the Jewish community, obviously, looking at what happened yesterday, the trajectory that got Australia to this place. Do you have any insights or things that you think we as South Africans should be worried about? That can a similar thing like this happen here? Are we safe from that? What should we be careful of going forward? What is your take on that for our own nation?
It's a great question. I don't think I have the simple answer to it. I think I can just bring you my perspective.
Yes.
Is that for my past 2 years experience of, as you said, engaging with faith leaders, even parliamentarians, scholars, leaders of the community, I see a great need of people with platforms and people of influence to come together, and especially in prayer. I believe, as I said before, in a power of prayer to uplift even the leaders of South Africa, and to take them accountable for the current situation in South Africa. South Africa is very unique, I must say, because until now, thank God, we haven't had any physical harm to the Jewish community. And this is really, really special, and I will give a great credit. The credit will go to mainly the chief rabbi. They're taking a very bold stand, and raising an awareness and speaking out and call call it for what it is. And I think by doing that, he kind of sending a very strong message to the leaders of South Africa that not on our watch,
Wow.
that stand, the hostile stand that they're taking against the state of Israel, that been really fueling propaganda and fueling anti-Semitism here locally, we will not take it in silent, and we will raise our voice. And I think that really, in a way, rescued, the Jewish community here in South Africa from a physical harm. I think I will give him that credit.
Okay.
And there is other leaders that I won't mention their names, but they are doing many, many good actions and taking actions behind the scenes, even in closed doors, in numerous conversations. And also leaders such as yourself that coming in prayer. We've been together in a prayer events and in a panel discussion, and you bring an awareness and you bring truth to power. And that is really, really important. We need more of that. And one thing you asked me about the future, I personally hopeful about South Africa because you know me as a brother. I have a very strong connection to our Creator, and a few decades ago it was almost a blessings, a prophecy kind, from the Rebbe Milubavitch in the Chabad community. Says for the Jews in South Africa it will be better for them in South Africa before Mashiach will come, and even better when Messiah is arriving. So I'm holding to that. I'm holding to that very dearly to my heart.
All right. Beautiful. Yeah. So, I mean, what happened yesterday should be, I mean, in a way, it should be a warning of what can happen if certain things are allowed. So for me, there's our leaders on government level and on other levels should look at that and catch a wake up is what I'm thinking as well. And hopefully they will. I hear you. Like, we have to speak about these things. We have to bring the right things to the front and have these conversations. What obviously, it's difficult in a nation where our government has taken Israel to the international court, which, that's a whole separate thing. But that's a kind of action that doesn't help the situation. It doesn't. It breeds more contempt. It breeds more hatred and negativity towards the Jewish community. So, I would like to say, from my perspective, I think our government seriously needs to change their tactic and position, because it has other knock-on effects. But I don't want to put you on the spot with that. You can say if you agree or don't, but I think those are the kinds of things that if you look at what happened, there's cause and effect, and positions, propaganda, indoctrination, things we say, they have an impact on people, and they open doors in a way for worse things to take place. I don't know. What do you think of what I just said, brother? Do you agree? Do you not agree? Where do you think we're heading?
I think the cause and effect is definitely felt in South Africa in many ways. And I will expect, for South Africa government to even articulate how it's even benefiting the average South African, for them to take the state of Israel to the ICJ. And I will argue that it goes against the best interest of any South African, because most South Africans, and we know, have a natural affinity towards the state of Israel by their faith.
Yes.
They're Christians that they believe in the state of Israel to exist in their homeland, and a biblical promise. And I believe that economically, it's not benefiting the average South African of the foreign policy that South Africa government took Israel to the International Court of Justice. It is purely a propaganda that only serves the Islamic regime of Iran and Hamas and those proxies. Over time, we will get to know that this is all lies, that doesn't hold in the Court of Justice. And it put a huge burden on the economy of South Africa. So it's even creating, I think we're going to see South Africa being disqualified from AGOA, billions of rands that going to be taken away from the economy. Yeah. Thousands of jobs that are going to be lost. and they are turning themselves, the government of South Africa turning themselves against their economic allies of the United States of America. It doesn't make any sense.
No, doesn't.
But it does make sense when you're looking at it from a corruption point of view.
Yeah.
So I will give it to the corruption. I won't hold my breath that we will see soon a change. But we need to keep and move the needle, to come together, as I said, in unity, to bring about faith leaders, faith-based diplomacy. I genuinely believe can play a significant role in South Africa. And between us, brother, I believe there is a special anointing on South Africa. So let's keep that to our hope.
I think there's a lot. Yes, I think there's a lot to be positive about, and something that I feel strongly is that if we can find one positive thing to unite around, if we can rally around this idea that life is precious and each human life in our nation deserves, to be to be let. What do I want to say? Each life is precious and should be lived, and others should respect that. I think if we can all agree on that, we might differ about God, doctrine, the books we read, but if we can rally around this idea that life is precious and we all deserve to have life, I think we can move towards a much better future for our nation. And
Sure.
Just on that thought, I don't understand much about Hanukkah. It happened with the lighting ceremony. What does Hanukkah mean to you, and how can those who don't know anything about it understand it a bit better? And how is that even in the midst of this a hopeful thing? In this current climate.
Sure. What a beautiful thoughts. I've been reminded that we sat down in a panel discussion together with Loai, and him as a Muslim teaching me, or maybe even you, the fact that Jesus was dedicating the Festival of Light in the temple in Jerusalem.
Yes, very interesting.
And I thought it's so beautiful to hear it from him. I think Hanukkah represent, I would say it even universally, is that miracle that the can of oil that was supposed to last only one day lasted for 8 days, and that when we giving our best effort, in that physical universe, to do one act of kindness to light up, the world to a better place, God is coming and commanding his blessings, and then he can take that deed and multiply it 8 times fold. And you are absolutely right, brother. It doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, a Buddhism, a Baha'i. If you just bring that value, a selfless act, to bring light, to assist one another and live in dignity and respectfully and with love, not with hatred in your heart, but with love that can build, because hate is destroying and love is what builds us. And if we can hold to that love, I believe that Hanukkah should be a universal holiday that should be celebrated globally and to bring more light to the world.
Amen. Light and darkness, that is what we see very, very vividly playing out in front of us. And I guess the goal of today's conversations is to call on those who believe we need more light to be part of that difference, to shine the light. Every voice matters. Stop being afraid. Stand for what's right. Stand for justice. Do what you can with the platform and the sphere of influence you have. If each one does that, I think we can see a collective shift, a positive change. What would your message be as we wrap up this conversation? I know you have another meeting, but what would your last thoughts be to those who are listening today?
My thought will be that we have hope in this life, and that hope is driven from our acts, from our actions. So I encourage everyone that's listening to us is to light up a candle tonight and to bring more light and chase the darkness and bring that with the intention of your heart to light up the world to a better place. And also act kindly to your neighbor, to your family, starting with your nuclear family, to your wife, to your children. Pick up the phone to someone, show your interest, that you care for them, give them some love, and let's really change the world to a better place. It's all about a ripple effect. So thank you for being you, Heinz, and for being such a light to our community and to South Africa, and I think to the world. You're a very special friend.
Thank you, Daniel. Same to you, brother. Lots of love to you and your family, and may your trip be safe. And thank you for taking this time to talk to us today. God bless you.
Thank you. Okay, blessings.
Steve Swart, thank you so much for joining me today for this special edition of the In Hindsight BOLDCAST. One day I'd love to have you here as my one-on-one guest for a whole talk, but under the circumstances, I thought it was prudent to also speak to you today after the horrific attack that we have witnessed take place in Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia. Brother, what's your take on this? How are you thinking about this, and what's your response?
Well, firstly, from our perspective as the African Christian Democratic Party, we expressed our shock and outrage at this terrorist attack on innocent Jewish civilians that were on the beach celebrating the first night of Hanukkah, which is the festival of lights. It is a family event, lighting the candles. And here we have two terrorists attacking, killing from 10-year-olds to Holocaust survivors, to the rabbi that was there, killing it. And it's absolutely disgraceful. But it is a direct result of worldwide incitement under the guise of anti-Zionism, this worldwide global rise of anti-Semitism. And I want to commend you, Heinz, and thank you for inviting me, but commend you and so many Christian leaders that are now taking a stand and saying, no longer will we allow that. We need to take a stand. We've got to take a stand. And it's absolutely disgraceful. This has got nothing to do with what's going on in Israel. This is blatant anti-Semitism and must be called out for what it is. And we as Christians need to continue, as we both have done, to say to the Jewish community, you are not alone.
Yes.
We stand with you. And it is, as you alerted on your social media and as we have done, this is a critical time. How can it be that you have this attack in Australia? And one of the reasons is that the Australian government has done nothing or very little to stop the hate speech, to stop the incitement that has been taking place ongoing. I mean, they've had more than 1,000, I think 1,600 incidents of anti-Semitism. And they've done very little. And it's useless to now say we're going to tighten gun control. That's
not the issue.
They need to address the root cause of this issue, and we all need to. And that is global jihadistic movement. That is what it is. That's what it's got to be called out. How come suddenly now, overnight, you've got the Melbourne Jewish celebration has been cancelled? You've got all these across the world. New York increasing patrols, France, every Jewish center, guards, even the Paris New Year's Eve celebration cancelled. It's absolutely disgraceful, and we've got to call it out for what it is. And all of us, as moderate, peace-loving people across faiths, in fact, and I was so encouraged to see Mr. Ahmed, without a moment's hesitation, grabbing that terrorist. And that is what our hope lies, is for moderate people across the world of all faiths to stand up and say, we will not allow this to take place anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to shine the light, you know. Hanukkah is about the light shining. It's the miracle of, you know, oil burning for 8 days. It was only enough for one day. And it's actually so symbolic, you know, for this moment in a way. And as I was speaking to people today and kind of just also processing all of this stuff, the thing that kept coming up in my heart is that we must know every voice counts. I don't know about you, but I don't want anyone to think that their voice won't matter. if they stand up, if they say something, if they just stand up for justice and righteousness, and for people to be able to live. We should be able to rally around that.
Of course,
don't you
and
think?
now
Yeah.
The result is increased security at almost any public event. Both of us have experienced the intimidation and intolerance when we had a prayer meeting in Cape Town on the Sea Point Pavilion. What right do people have to disrupt our prayer meeting? Yeah, in South Africa. And we
Cape
see,
Town.
thankfully, we do not see many anti-Semitic actions in South Africa. We need to pray that will continue. But there is huge security necessary. Now it appears in any public meeting, you're going to have almost to have an army of security to protect you from the possibility of someone who then wants to promote a very violent jihadist movement at that event. And we need to be I think you put it very well, for us to wake up, because the threat is right here on our borders. And I think our government needs to wake up. And yes, we welcome the fact that they as well, South African government, condemned this attack.
Yeah.
But to what degree do they contribute to this incitement, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, by public statements, by downgrading the embassy in Israel, by the court case alleging genocide? I think there's an accountability from the perspective in South Africa as well. But I do want to also just wish our Jewish viewers a very happy Hanukkah despite this darkness.
Yeah.
Shag Sameach Hanukkah. The light will shine. We will stand with you. You're not alone. That is my message to the Jewish people. We love you. We stand with you. And it's so important for them to realize that there are people of faith that will stand with them. But the point that you made is so important. And that is, we have to start speaking out. Every single one of us. The Christian pastor, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who saved many lives during the Nazi brutality and gave his life as well. He was executed.
Sure.
Saving Jewish lives. He said, silence in the face of evil is evil itself.
Sure.
God will not hold you blameless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. So it is time for us to be people of faith, of courage, to pray and to have action.
Yeah.
And to call this out for what it is, and to stand together in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem, to stand together in solidarity with the Jewish community worldwide. It's so important at this time.
Yeah.
Because these incidents continue. And this is almost a new threshold of barbarism on an innocent beach. I've been to Bondi Beach. I'm sure you've been there. It's the most incredible
I've never been myself. I haven't been to Australia, actually. I'd love to go.
Yes,
but
yes.
It looks
But
like a
it
beautiful
is
place.
beyond the pale. And that is why we need to send a message from us as Christians, as Christian leaders, to the Jewish community globally, in Australia and South Africa. You are not alone. And the word of God teaches us in Isaiah to comfort my people, says the Lord. And so we also want to send a message of comfort at this time, of solidarity, of saying with you, we comfort you, we mourn with you. Please accept our deepest condolences. How can this be acceptable in any civilization, and in particularly in a constitutional democracy like Australia? And it is time for the Australian government to also accept responsibility for not taking sufficient action to stop the incitement and the hate speech.
So on that note, do you think this was avoidable?
I would think that had the Australian government, who had already, I understand, questioned one of the individuals involved, had they taken greater care in doing more research and being aware of the possibility. I don't know what security was in place on the day, but given the increasing number of anti-Semitic acts in Australia, I think the figure was 1,600 or something.
Crazy.
Surely a massive event like this requires sufficient security and requires additional intelligence gathering and requires the government to cut back on incitement on hate speech, to make use of those laws and not to allow people to be shouting slogans of death to the Zionists. And what does the slogan from the river to the sea mean? That means basically death to the Jewish people.
Wipe out,
doesn't it?
That's crazy.
And so we need to be very aware of that incitement, and we need to be very aware as well and to be prayerful of the possibility of something like that happening in South Africa as well.
I was just going to ask you, should this be a warning? Should this be a wake-up call to our country, to our government? How should we view this as a Christian community? How should we view this as a nation, do you think?
We need to view it with a great sense of urgency. We need to be prayerful for protection. Isaiah 54, no weapon that is formed against us shall prosper, but we also need to ensure that our law enforcement agencies services have a heightened capability. And we know they are struggling at the moment. The evidence is all there before the Matlanda Commission and others of the challenges facing our criminal justice sector. We also know that we have got ISIS and other jihadist operatives on our borders, Mozambique, DRC, in Africa, that there's a possibility of Mali even falling as a country.
Sure.
So we need to be very aware of the activities here on our continent. And this is so important for us. So it's prayer and action. And we know the Jewish communities take a lot of security precautions, but I think each one of us needs to be very aware of our surroundings. We know that our Lord protects us, but we need to be very vigilant and aware and ensuring that our law enforcement agencies have sufficient resources and abilities, particularly from an intelligence perspective, to be aware of what is going on in the country itself.
That's true, but that's dealing with the symptom. You know, technically it shouldn't even be a problem. People should be able to exercise their freedom of religion, you know, freely, without fear of intimidation, fear of attack, fear of life, you know, and being taken away. It's so hectic that we have to have, you know, what you just said, that's even necessary. But we do need to deal with the symptoms, but we also want to see a change. We want to see things turn around, and that will take prevention. That'll take building something better for the future, because, you know, we don't want the next generation of any faith to feel they don't have a right to exist. They don't have a right to gather and express what they believe. This is something Christians and Jews share at the moment. Both of our faiths are being under attack, are being attacked across the globe. And it's this, the source seems to be the same. You know, it's radicalized Islam, and it's coming for our faiths. And it's something that we should be aware of. I don't think we should live in fear, like you say, but we need to be practical, but also look at solutions. So I don't know, Steve, if you have come up with some solutions for our nation, but what's on your heart? What would you like to see happen on local ground to see that we do not end up, you know, like Australia in this instance?
Well, I think thankfully in South Africa we have had very good relations between the faiths over the years. We are grateful that there hasn't been too much anti-Semitic actions. We have seen a lot of emotions arising after October 7th. And I think that we need to continue those discussions across faiths. We are we follow our scriptures. Blessed be the peacemakers. So I think there's a very central role of peacemaking, of dialogue, of discussions. I do that in Parliament. I build relations across faiths. I've got very strong relations with my colleagues of other faiths, and I think it's very important. And we need to also understand that some of these very extreme jihadists also target their own Muslim people. We've seen that as well.
Oh, wow.
So we need to also identify that it's not only a threat to Christians and Jews, but also to those moderate Muslims as well. And so we need to continue building those relations. But secondly, we need to be very careful about incitement and slogans and propaganda that amounts to hate speech, where it is anti-Zionism under the guise, well, it's anti-Semitism under the guise of anti-Zionism. And I think that is a particular issue that requires a lot more attention in South Africa. We know many people are very concerned about this apartheid bill, and we've taken quite a strong stance about that. That, to me, is a process that's unnecessary at this stage. Yes, it's an introductory phase. There's no vote taking place in Parliament like people are thinking. It's a notice of intention to introduce a bill targeted at Israel. Now, we as the ACDP have opposed that. We will oppose that. But again, whilst anyone is entitled to bring such legislation, is it not amounting to inflammatory emotions yet again? As was the IEC genocide case. And it's important to note that at this stage, the court has made no findings on genocide. What it has found is that the Palestinians in Gaza quite correctly are entitled to be protected under the Genocide Convention. So you have all these emotions. And I would encourage us as South Africans just to lower the temperature. We're a predominantly Christian nation, a majority of Christians in the nation. And I think if we can take up our role as peacemakers, prayer and seeking dialogue, and talking amongst each other, but there's a firmness as well. There's a line in the sand. We will not be dictated to by minorities. We will not be intimidated, as I was when I traveled to Israel. We will not allow that to happen. And so there's a fine balance between seeking peace, but also being very firm in standing up for one's faith at a time when our colleagues in the Jewish community feel so alienated, they feel so threatened, they feel so alone. And that is disgraceful, because we are all first and foremost South Africans of very diverse backgrounds, but we can build our nation together and set an example for the rest of the world, particularly at this time. And I think it's important to emphasize the fact, we are very grateful that there are very few anti-Semitic acts in South Africa. And that illustrates to me that there's a groundswell of goodwill across faiths. But it just takes one or two extremists, like we saw now in Australia. But the context, I think, is different there. I do not think Australia has done enough, as I've indicated, to stop incitement, hate speech, and the numbers of incidents that have been building up. So let's be prayerful, let's be trustful, let's build relations, let's talk to one another so that we can jointly deal with extremism, jihadism that threatens all of us in South Africa across all faiths. And that's why, again, I emphasize it was encouraging to see a moderate Mr. Ahmed taking his life into his own hands and fearlessly, without a thought, instantaneously taking action, which saved, I believe, many, many lives, with himself also being shot. And that is highly, highly commendable. And I think our call should be to all moderates in South Africa, even across the world, start taking a stand against extremism, against the far left that are using inflammatory language, and all these protests across the world now, but that are targeted the Jewish communities and have very little to do with what is actually going on in Israel at this time.
Just as a last thing, there seems to be a term that is not easily defined, but what is your take on the actual meaning of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism? How do you understand those terms? Because you said, it's the one under the guise of the other. What is your understanding of those terms? Because I think it's important for clarity that we all understand what we're talking about.
Well, Zionism is basically the belief that Israel has got the right to exist and to defend itself and its borders.
Yeah.
So anti-Zionism would be against the establishment of the State of Israel and against the fact that Israel should and can defend itself.
And anyone who believes that as well, you're against them too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And anyone who believes that. So you'd be labeled an anti-Zionist or a Zionist, and those opposing.
I've received those. I've received those terms. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so, but distinct from that, and I don't think there is much of a distinction, but our courts have raised that distinction in South Africa between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Anti-Semitism is targeted against the Jewish community, no matter where you are, merely and purely because you are Jewish. Doesn't matter.
So, but isn't that just racism? Isn't that just racism in a way? Yeah. So it's actually racism, but no one is calling it that. Sure.
Yes, and it is contrary to our constitutional values of freedom of religion, contrary to our values of Section 9 equality. So it is contrary to a number of our constitutional enshrined protections, rights that are protected. But we've seen throughout ages, we've seen anti-Semitism. We've seen almost an attempt by the evil one to wipe out the Jewish state. Wipe out Jewish people as well. And so there is a very strong spiritual dimension as well. And that's why we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We stand with Israel. We stand with the Jewish people across the world. And we oppose anti-Semitism as a form of injustice, where we should stand for all injustice, whether it is, as we've done, against the Christians that are persecuted in Africa. We've mentioned Muslims that are being persecuted as well. But the levels of anti-Semitism that have grown worldwide is intolerable at the moment. It is absolutely out of control. And again, it's under this guise of anti-Zionism and almost an excuse to say, well, what, in fact, the question should be asked, what has the fact of attacking innocent people on a beach that are celebrating Hanukkah got to do with Israel? That is the central question in a constitutional democracy. It's disgraceful. It must be called out for what it is. It must be condemned in the strongest possible terms by every peace-loving person of whatever faith you are.
Absolutely. I just one more question about governance, which now seems to be an issue that comes front and center again, the whole thing about gun control. I don't know, Stephen, as far as I know, guns don't kill people. People kill people with guns. And it's the age-old issue that's been tossed to and fro in America. We've seen it play out here in a smaller way, but they have very strict gun control in Australia, and this still happened. So why would they now clamp down on that as the main issue? And maybe they should rather refocus on who they're letting into their country who want to kill Jews. Wouldn't that be a better solution or a better tactic? What do you think?
No, I would agree that they're looking at the wrong issue here. I would agree that they need a higher degree of intelligence to understand. I'm talking about crime intelligence now as to who is within their borders and what danger do they present? And are they doing sufficient vetting of people? Are they watching social media posts? Are they aware of what those people are saying? Do they present a threat? Are they allowing incitement, hate speech? I think it's not the wisest move to focus now on tightening gun control. We've had that same debate here in South Africa with high levels of crime. They indicate, well, if we remove the guns, we remove firearms, then there'll be less crime. Well, it is the firearms in the hands of the criminals that is committing the crimes. And in many cases, and we firmly believe that you have the right to defend yourself and the right to defend your family, and that you have the right, should you wish to do so, to have a firearm. And so we've opposed over the years attempts to disarm law-abiding citizens, because then you are at the mercy of criminals, particularly in the environment of South Africa, where you have got such a high level of crime and violence. With South Africa, you've got an issue of rampant crime and not dealing with the firearms that are in the hands of the criminals. And I think that is a central issue. Don't target law-abiding citizens. And I'm thinking that that could be the situation in Australia, where I'm not fully aware of their gun control legislation, but rather look at the deep symptoms here and get back to the people that present a threat to your law-abiding citizens. They now seek to impose stricter gun control laws.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, brother, final thought from your side. Message to South Africans, message to the church in South Africa, or whatever you have on your heart. What would you like to share at this time?
Well, I think, again, we want to say at the second night of Hanukkah, which is the lighting of the candles, which celebrates a miracle of the oil lasting in the temple, the victory of the Maccabees. I think, again, to just encourage our Jewish congregation, our Jewish community in South Africa to be strong and to stand firm, celebrating the festival of lights. Light will overcome darkness.
Amen.
Good
Come on.
will overcome evil. And it is a message of solidarity and support. And a message to all our Christian viewers is just to encourage them to take a stand for justice and righteousness, for the protection of vulnerable people in our nation, or whatever faith they are, but particularly at this time, our Jewish communities that feel very threatened, that feel very isolated, and to just reach out with a word of love, of encouragement, of comfort. But lastly, just to wish our Christian viewers a very blessed Christmas as we celebrate the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is the light of the world.
Yeah.
And so that message from us as the ACDP, and trusting for a really blessed 2026, where we can build our nation together, peace and harmony and prosperity for all, as we deal with extremism in our nation in a very firm and robust method, with prayer and with action. So thank you, Heinz, for that opportunity just to express those views from us in the ACDP in Parliament.
Of course. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on and talking about this very important matter. We agree. We stand with you, and again, the light will outshine the darkness, and so let our light shine, and remember, every voice counts, and together it will make a loud enough shout to shift things. Let's just encourage each other. I truly believe that boldness is contagious. So be bold, be fearless, stand on what you believe, and know that there's greater things at play that we are fighting for, and it's not just for us, it's for those who will come after us. So thank you, Steve, and God bless you and your family, and thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Heinz. Blessings to you and your family as well.
Thank you so much for watching this special edition of the In Hindsight BOLDCAST. I want to just say from our side that we think of, pray for, and feel extreme sympathy for those who have been affected by this horrific, cowardly attack in broad daylight on peace-loving people, bringing a candlelight ceremony to a beach in a first world nation that's supposed to be free. Our hearts go out to every family member, every friend that has lost someone in this horrible event. We pray that the comfort of God will be with you and that you will get through this and be stronger. And then we want to make a call on everyone listening that says they stand for justice and righteousness, that say that they believe in light over darkness. Your voice matters. Make it count. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing and thanks for sharing. We really appreciate it. God bless you.